Welcome to you all to our parallel breakout session 5B, New Technologies Research and Innovation as an Enabler for Sustainable Raw Materials Supply. That's a long session name. This is the only pre-recorded session of the entire conference. And we will start with 4 films on innovation and new technologies, and then we will all regroup here for a panel discussion. So I hope you all will enjoy the films. See you later.
Hello, my name is Lisa Annerlöv. I'm an industrial designer at Boliden System Technology, and I'm going to tell you about our journey towards remote-controlled battery-powered scaling. I'm going to start with tell you a little bit about the operation of scaling and the challenge of remote controlling this. Then I'm going to tell you about the different steps we've had on the way, and in between there, some short about our mine automation strategy. Then I'm going to wrap up with the learnings from our journey and some thoughts for the next step. Let's start. This is a mechanical scaling machine. It's a very robust machine with a strong arm that is holding a hydraulic hammer. It is diesel driven today, but during scaling you connect it to the electric infrastructure. Scaling is a safety operation in the blast cycle. The scaler goes in after the blasted ore is outloaded, and it hammers off the blocks that are loose so that only stable rock is left when the reinforcement operations take place. Today, the operator sits in a well-built suspended cab on the machine that protects from the worst shakes, the falling stones, and the noise. To perform this job, the operator uses visual, auditory, and tactile impressions. The operator starts by reading the rock, that is, tapping the rock a little carefully and watching and listening to the response. Does pebble fall from somewhere? Do any cracks appear or color differences? And how is the sound? Does it sound clangorous and solid or more muffled? And the difference here is not very big, but it contains a lot of information. All these sensory impressions must be interpreted, and based on you decide what you're going to do next, what parts that should be scaled down and what can be left. And this is a knowledge that comes with experience. The operator says that it's a gut feeling. If you scale too little, the drift might not be safe for your colleagues to enter, and if you scale too much than necessary, it is a waste of time and money. And of course, this was something that we wanted to remotely control. We have a mine automation program, and we have the goal within the program to increase the safety and improve the work environment for our colleagues, and to run the mine 24/7, fully visualized. So of course, remote scaling was included in that goal. But many people at Boliden, among them both operators and experienced engineers, were, to say the least, skeptical, saying, yeah, maybe you can remote control the scaler, but I wouldn't want to send my colleagues to work under that rock afterwards. Or, yeah, you might be able to remotely control many of the machines, but not the scaler. You need to be there at the face of the rock to do the job. So that was our starting point. And as I said, we have so far 3 main projects that have kind of defined our job in this field. And for each step, we are getting closer. The first step was a degree work in industrial design in 2013. And the framing of the question was, how should the remote control situation be designed to make the operator get a proper perception of the rock at the work area? And it ended up in a concept of how remote scaling could be like to meet both the user needs and the requirements of the operation. Now what you see here is just a foam model, but the concept included a lot of fancy features like force feedback and tip control of the arm, an ergonomic work position, visual support to interpret the sound, laser Doppler vibrometry, etc. But the best thing was that people got a new perspective on remote scaling. And it was that remote scaling can give the operator new opportunities and ways to perform the job at least equally well compared to sitting in the machine. As an example, this is the view that the operator has from inside the cab of the machine today. And as you can see, both the protective grille and the boom itself is hiding a large part of the work area. And this is how the field of view would look if the operator instead saw through a camera on the roof of the cab. And then you also have the opportunity to change perspectives. The same goes for the sound. Inside the cab, the sound is very more muffled than from outside, where it's much more clear, even though it's loud as crazy. But it contains more information. So that was the design concept. A statement had been made and people had started to change their opinions. And 3 years later, we were ready to take the next step. And as an introduction to that, I would like to say something short about our mine automation strategy. This is Kankberg Mine, and that is one of our main innovation assets. As you know, Boliden, for the first, we extract and produce metals. We do not produce mining machines or other technical solutions. That is not our ambition nor our possibility. But we have bold visions for the use of this new technology. And some of these supplying companies that do have this possibilities and business focus is close to or within Sweden. So hence, we drive development through partnerships and collaborations. We try to find the win-win projects. We offer our mines as a test bed for R&D projects, for marketing activities, and we get access to and may impact the new technology in mining. That's how we get paid. So, as of course, it is important to find the cases and the projects that both we and our partners find interesting. And the first proof of concept project we did regarding remote scaling is a good example of that. In that case, we collaborated with a company, Brokk, who develop remote controlled demolition robots. And their interest in joining us in this project was to try out remote control wireless and also explore new ways of presenting the visual image. And of course, they had a machine that was really similar to a scaling machine. So that was the use for us in collaborating with them. We used a user-centered development process in this project. We focused on remote control only of the scaling operation, not the transport or setup of the machine. We also evaluated remote scaling as a method, not some specific machine or some specific commercial solution for this. Yeah, and it was a truly interesting and challenging project. At start, we thought it would take approximately 6 to 9 months to do this, but it ended up taking a bit more than 2 years. We didn't exactly know all the competences we needed to have in the project, and the wireless connection was one of our biggest challenges, but we learned a lot. And in the end, we had around 14 demonstrations for people within our mine and other people, and people really started to change their minds for real now, saying, yeah, I was skeptical at first, but I must change my mind. or no doubt that this works, and I've been scaling for over 30 years. So of course this felt like a huge success. So now we had proven that this actually seems to be not only possible, but also something that could be implemented in our minds relatively soon. And in September 2019, we officially started the remote scaling pilot project. And now we collaborated with Yama, who is a supplier, developer and supplier for this kind of mining machines. Again, we used a user-centered development process. We focused in this case also on remote controlling only the scaling operation, not the transport or the setting up, like attaching water and electricity. And the goal was to develop a prototype of our remote system for a scaler. Back to Kankberg then. Since to be able to build a prototype and to test and verify new technology, we need to do this in sharp environments. But that comes with a price. In an underground mine, the physical space is limited and the access to production equipment is very limited. So in this project, we were really lucky to get a whole mining machine of our own to use during the tests. Yama had recently developed a brand new scaling machine that was available and that we could use in this project. There was only one obstacle. It was battery powered. And with battery powered machines in enclosed spaces, people tend to worry about fires and gases and other unknown risks. With all rights. This should be handled with the greatest respect. So, using this specific machine in our project required a process in itself of risk analysis, extensive dialogue with suppliers and the local rescue service, and a lot of information and dialogue with the colleagues in Kankberg mine. But the conclusion was that, yes, there are some unknown risks with battery-equipped machines in enclosed spaces, but we do know enough for the risks to be manageable. This whole extra battery journey was a challenge in itself, but we got effects from this that was above our expectations. Regarding performance of the battery power during scaling, and also the advantage of mobility that you get from battery-equipped vehicles. And I will tell you a bit more about that later. So we had our machine, and now we were going to start with the pre-testing and the development activities. And really quick here, we started with tests of lights and cameras on a pickup to be more mobile. We did streaming tests with the company Voices, from whom we had the streaming software. Then we did durability tests of the equipment on a production scaler for 9 weeks. We didn't remote control it, but we tested the durability of the hardware, since it's a quite tough environment. We also did a lot of tests of the settings and image processing possibilities, and some final camera evaluation. And finally, we also, of course, did the whole development of the remote control system in itself. It was Yama who was responsible for this, and it went really well. We also had the image presentation set up to work with. We tried 2 4K screens and a VR headset to start with. And then also, last but not least, we had to do a lot of corona compromises. We did a lot of 3D printed mock-ups to help us during the way, and we had a lot of knowledge exchanges from our network to find new inputs and solutions. And at the very end of last year, we got our remote controlled battery powered mechanical scaling machine ready for some sharp tests underground. And we had prepared prepared it in a modular way so that it would be easy and possible to make some equipment changes if necessary, depending on the feedback from the operators. We used the already existing Wi-Fi in the mine, which gave us some trouble since it's really not built for these kind of applications, but we got it to work with us after some tricks. During this sharp test period, we got a good reason to change also from a stereo camera image presented in this VR headset to instead a projected 3D image presented on a canvas that you looked on with active 3D glasses. Not only was the 3D glasses much easier to disinfect, it also offered a much more pleasant and easily worked user experience overall. So, to wrap up this, the learnings from this whole journey, these 3 steps, to start with, a user-centered process is key. Since it's a human being being in center, and since this specific operation is such a craft, you need to evaluate constantly with the operator. Also, remote control can give the operator new opportunities and ways to perform the job, since you don't have any cab limitations anymore. And another example is that the recent haptic information that you've had, like the pressure on the arm, from the arm on the rock, and the movements, that is now perceived visually through the camera image, and that was not something we had expected, but a really good surprise. Then, to start simple and work iterative has really helped us in this journey. And you also, of course, need to find the balance between the lab tests and the tests in sharp environment. The sharp tests, they cost more, but they also give a lot more. Then the development of cameras, VR, hardware, etc. is progressing rapidly. And that could be both inspiring and discouraging. And I think a key here is to find what is good enough today and to think agile and trust that even better will come, and don't wait for like the final product since it might never come. It's a constant development. So dare to start somewhere. And then also from this last project especially, to that we could use one project as a stepping stone for another. This project has really paved the way for a more extensive use of battery machines underground. Now we could test this battery-equipped machine in a quite controlled manner within this R&D project, but the experiences has really lowered the threshold for using such a machine in a larger extent. So that was really a benefit. And also, since we have not been focusing on remote controlling the machine setup at the work area, it turned out that the battery powered reduced the need for it as well, because of the mobility that it offers. And also, of course, we don't have the same problem with the dust control when we don't have a human being in the area. And also, that thing itself has helped us coming closer to one of the targets we are aiming for in our mine automation program roadmap. That is to be able to do the watering, the loading, and the scaling in one sequence without people present in the production area. This would make it possible to start the work quite soon after blasting without having to wait for the whole ventilation to be done. Remote scaling might have been, in this case, the hardest nut to crack, but now it's in a really close reach if we combine it with the mobility of battery power, or if someone invents an autonomous connection for water and electricity underground. So that is really interesting. We have also been in this project together with Mid Sweden University. They have been exploring remote scaling from a perspective of augmented telepresence. And what you see here in the blue square in the middle is the rendered result of 2 video streams of a robot arm, very similar to what we have done on the scaling machine. And as you see in the middle, the robot arm is rendered to be transparent. And so that is one augmentation that you could get as a remote scaling operation in a near future. And that this is also a good example of how we can combine within a project both lab experiments on a university and sharp tests underground, but with different time perspective focuses. And also, as a last slide, I would like to say something about thoughts for the future, because I think it's really important to all the time rethink what we think is truths. For example, the scaling. I believe that the new circumstances when it comes to mine automation will affect the safety needs, and we need to think about that. Like techniques for measuring the actual local fractures of the rock, that is really something that we need to look into, no matter how we will perform this operation in the future. We have smart rock bolts that we have tried in our mines now. Maybe that could be some way to collect such data. And then, of course, AI, or analysis of rock data instead of human judgment. That is really something to try to think about when it comes to the long-term development of, for example, scaling. And this could be of help both for execution of scaling and also predict the need for it. Maybe we don't need it in the same extent as we do today. And also a whole new approach. Why not just carve an arch structure, no matter how it sounds or something? Just make it enough for when we don't have any humans around. We don't have to have the same safety approach then, and we need to have that in mind when we do these kind of projects. The future is really interesting. Thank you so much for listening.
Hi everyone, my name is Martin Gidlund. This is my colleague, Jan Abrahamsson. Thank you. We both work at LTU Business, where we are consultants. We are daily working with business development and innovation management with a broad range of customers. It stretches from local SMEs to international research projects.
So today we're going to talk about innovation in a broad sense, and also innovation in the context of the mining industry. And the overarching theme of this is like why innovation is not optional for your business. It's a must. It's not something you can choose not to do if you want to grow or even if you want to survive. So Martin, can you tell us what is innovation actually?
To shortly answer the question, what is innovation? Well, it's creation. It's creating something new, it's developing something existing, or implementing something. And you can do this on a broad scale of complexity. So to simplify it, we can have a look at the innovation matrix. Basically, we could say that we are dividing innovation into 4 different types of innovation, depending on the technology newness and also the impact on the market. And to illustrate this, I thought maybe we could have a look at the market that we are all familiar with. So if we're looking at the mobile phones that we have today, so the development we often see is that the manufacturers of mobile phones, they come with new models every 2 or 3 years, where they have added new features that are increasing the performance, or the products are getting better. And this they do to sustain their position in the market. So this would be classified as sustaining innovation. But in between those periods, they are also adding design features. They may be upgrading the software, which would be considered to be incremental. It has a low impact on the market, and it has a low newness of technology. If we're looking at more radical innovation. I think if you were born in the 80s or before, you can relate to when a mobile phone was a device that you could call and maybe text from. If you were lucky and had the latest model, you could also play Snake. I couldn't, I never could. I skipped that step. But at some point, the manufacturers realized that maybe we can innovate this product somehow. Maybe we can add some new technology to the product. Maybe we can integrate a color screen and a camera. So that's when they did that, they did radical innovation. And the ultimate form of innovation would be then disruptive innovation. So still looking at the mobile phones, disruptive innovation came when the smartphone came. So they realized, okay, now we have a product where we can call, we can text, and we can take photos. But what can we do to shift this product into something else? So they innovated it by creating a smartphone that was basically a computer that you wore with you or are wearing with you all the time. And now we can't live without it. So they really shifted the market. And that would be described as disruptive innovation. Moving on, one of the big questions regarding innovation is why should you do innovation? Well, the definition states that you should do innovation to improve efficiency, effectiveness, or to strengthen your competitive advantage. And in basic business theory, there's two ways to create competitive, or you can compete on a market. It's either by price or by differentiation. And so either you offer your product at a better price, or you offer a better product. And in both options, innovation is quite important. So Jan, I will put you on the spot here. Do you recognize this curve?
It looks very much like a pretty much traditional product lifecycle curve.
Exactly. It can vary in shape. It's a very useful curve, this curve, but in this case we refer it to as the product lifecycle. So all products pretty much will experience the same phases, where you have an expansive phase, you have the maturing phase, and then you have a declining phase. So when these phases occur, differs between products. But at some point, over time, they will always occur. And this is given you do no changes to your product. But this is where innovation comes in and plays an important role. So if you start developing, renewing, adding features to your product, if you basically do innovation to your product or your offering, then this could affect the curve. So if you're doing incremental or sustaining innovation, you will be able to prolong the life cycle of the product. If you're on the other hand are working more with radical innovation or disruptive innovation, you can totally shift the curve. So the risk of doing disruptive innovation is much higher because you are creating something brand new nobody has ever seen before. So you don't know if it will work or not. But so the starting path will be a bit longer. But once you succeed with your disruptive innovation, then the reward is much higher. You will be able to shift the curve and the market for your products. So now we learned a little bit more in general what innovation is, why you should do it, especially, and that it's actually important for your company. But it's not only important for the company. It's also in a broader sense, it's also important with innovation for the society as a whole. And I think there's some clear trends that we could see in the society, the move towards digitalization and also sustainability is getting increasingly important. And I think the drivers of that is innovation. And I think, I mean,
Exactly.
we can apply innovation in all industries, and looking into the mining industry. I think, I mean, John, you could maybe elaborate a bit, but
Yeah.
you see the same trends.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's exactly what you're saying. I mean, innovation plays a big part in solving societal problems. And one industry that we believe really plays a key part in solving societal challenges coming up is actually the mining industry. Through, for instance, the mining industry playing a big part in the electrification of society to rare earth minerals, battery minerals, and in order to do that, of course, the industry is digitalizing its operations, and that in turn, in all, creates new business model innovation opportunities within the mining industry. And now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the trends that we have been seeing within the mining industry. I mean, both you and I, Martin, we work with several different cases when it comes to innovation management and bringing new products to the market, targeting the mining and raw materials industry. So this is a lot derived from what we actually see in our day-to-day work, in that sense. And to sort of summarize this a little bit, we see three overarching interconnected trends in terms of digitalization, if we start off there, affecting the mining and raw materials industry. Those overarching trends is then automation, mixed reality, and digital exploration. And of course, each of them have different types of applications. For instance, if you talk about automation, you talk about things like having remote operations of a mine, self-driving vehicles, you have drones performing different types of functions. And of course, you are moving more and more towards AI-based decision and data analytics to AI. With mixed reality, you're talking about things such as digital twins. You do inspections and maintenance through augmented reality or virtual reality, and the same with supervision and support. And another thing that is really correct is using digital tools for enhancing exploration and finding new minerals and new raw material sources, which is extremely crucial, and also for electrification and for basically having this sustainable transformation of society. And of course, also in terms of when you have digital exploration, you reduce waste, you reduce lead times, and you cut costs. And all of these three overarching trends here, they're contributing to opportunities for innovating your business models in many different ways, whether it's about you change your cost structure, you get new revenue streams, you have new partners, you reach out to new customer segments, you need new resources to perform activities in a different way. And to sort of elaborate a little bit on that, what is actually going on here, or giving some examples about the new business models within the mining industry, is the fact that you have new partnership structures going on. Because what happens is that in order to innovate and stay competitive and ahead of the curve, mining companies are more and more frequently collaborating with tech-savvy startups or consultants, and that is creating a whole new sort of platform for innovation and for collaboration that wasn't really there in the same way, I would say, just 10, 12 years ago in the industry. And also consultants that have been used to work with the mining industry as technical consultants, they're forced to be more tech savvy, they're forced to act more like tech startups in the way they approach things, because they're the ones who need to work and come up with the new digital solutions to stay competitive. Otherwise, you're going to have them being outcompeted by new startups who is going to start supplying the mining industry instead of them. So there's this drive for innovation in many different levels. And of course, as I said before, new types of activities, you have manual tasks becoming digital, more focus on data analytics, and of course, more remote operation and more remote coaching of staff and labor. And of course, that also means that the cost that mining companies have, they're changing as well. I mean, not least in the way they're paying for services and products. They can be paid more through subscription or per usage. For instance, software as a service or data as a service, or by the value generated by that particular service. And the good thing for mining companies here is that these new models, they enable less capital expenditure and a less need for fixed assets that you'll have on the balance sheet, and have depreciation costs. And of course, on the other side of the equation, you also get new types of revenue, because what happens also is that in this sort of new partnership structure that I mentioned, you got mining companies partnering up with startups in terms of even revenue partnerships, or also equity partnerships, which means that you actually invest capital into those companies. And you can also be charging for data generated on digital platforms through your partners within the value chain. And also digitalization as such enables new products, and again in collaboration with the different partners, whether it's startups, consultancy companies, whatever it might be. And of course, resources, digital twins, autonomous vehicles, and new tools for other types of operational efficiency, as drill core scanners which you use for digital exploration. And what you also then end up with is new value propositions, because by doing this, you can have the opportunity to create value propositions that goes beyond the traditional industry value chain. And of course, this also entails you all of this digitalization effort, all the sustainability effort. It gives you better execution of a traditional value proposition for both new and existing segments, as demand for instance, tracking minerals or sustainability in your operations. That is something that is going to increase from the customer side as well. And one other case in point that can be looked at is, of course, one of our big mining companies here in Sweden, LKAB. And what they're doing in something that sort of combines this sort of societal challenge into a new business model, which is the fact that they're going to start using their tailing dam waste to retrieve so-called rare earth minerals used for instance, battery production. And that is obviously something very new for LKAB, but it's not just about generating new products. As in effect, you're also then creating a new business model which changes the way LKAB has been doing things for the last, I don't know, how long they've been in operation, 80, 90 years, something like that, Martin? Yeah. And traditionally, I mean, what they've been doing, to simplify a little bit, they've been digging out minerals from the ground, and then later on from beneath the surface level, and then either ship it out through the ports in Luleå or the port in Narvik. That's been what they're doing. Now they're looking at, okay, so what are the byproducts of our existing operations? What can we do with that? And then suddenly they're also circumventing the traditional industry value chain. And that means that they're actually having new customer segments. They have new partners. They have partially a new cost structure for doing this. And of course, also then new revenue streams coming in. So they're changing their business model in many ways by doing this, and they're also contributing to what's called a circularity, right? Because you have this closed loop of their old material flow by actually doing this. So it's a sustainable business model, it's a new business model with a new value proposition. So to sort of summarize this, it's all about how to get started, right, Martin? So I mean, this might seem daunting, but there is actually a pretty sort of straightforward way to actually get going, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I hopefully, I mean, some of you at least thinks that, okay, well, it's fine, I got this covered. I'm already doing innovation, and I'm already thinking in these terms, and I have identified the trends that I want to pursue. But if you haven't, then I mean, there's basically 3 steps that you need to take to start your innovation journey.
Exactly, and then looking from a perspective of existing organizations already in operation of some size or some magnitude. I mean, first of all, you need to look at what is your innovation readiness within the organization. What kind of leadership support do you have? What kind of things are you already doing today? So where are you in terms of your readiness, your current state of things?
Yeah, and then also, once you establish where you are right now, you also need to establish where you want to go. So you need to formulate a strategy. How should we approach innovation? What resources should we put aside to be working with innovation?
Exactly. So, I mean, it's all about, as Martin said, you set up your goals, you set up what are your key performance indicators, what you actually want to achieve. I mean, you want to cut costs? Do you want to have new revenues? Do you want new customers? Do you want to create new intellectual property? I mean, it all depends, obviously. So in order then to put this to action, you need, well, goes without saying, an action plan. But an action plan, when you work with innovation, that is something that needs to be lean and agile. You need to iterate on it. You need to make sure that you are objective about what you're doing. You make decisions based on data, and you're not painting yourself into a corner here because you want to make incremental investment based on what that data is telling you. So you don't overcommit, and then you have this sort of what is called the sunk cost fallacy, which means that you keep over-investing something just because you already put money into the wrong decision.
Yeah, and basically all of these 3 steps, this is not rocket science. You can do it in different levels. You can do it yourself, or you could seek help from consultants and stuff. But we have tools and methods to basically walk you through all these 3 steps of starting the innovation journey.
Exactly. And one of those tools is what we call the innovation due diligence, which is something that is battle tested through several hundred cases each year with anything starting from university researchers to large corporations. And that's a methodology that is based on cutting edge research into business management and entrepreneurship, and also, as I said before, tested rigorously in practice.
So to summarize our section here, there are some key takeaways to take with you when you leave today. Basically, you could say that innovation, it can be a lot of different things. It comes in different forms and shapes and sizes. So it could be doing some small minor adjustments to an existing product, to developing or creating a totally new market. But it's also important that innovation is something that doesn't happen. It doesn't just happen. It's something that you actively do, and you do it to stay relevant to your customers, to keep your company's competitive advantage.
And of course, as I said before, innovation holds the key to several societal challenges that we are all facing today. And the mining industry is, in many cases, in the actual epicenter of those challenges.
And I mean, if we're looking at the mining industry and the society, so the society demands a shift towards sustainability. And this has led the mining industry to present this great opportunity to say that, hey, we can actually contribute to this shift towards sustainability. So it's you can see it as an opportunity, or you can see it as something you must do. But I mean, eventually you need to step on the innovation train.
Exactly, and to properly capture the rewards for these initiatives that you may undertake, looking at digitalization, looking at sustainability, what is often required then to capture those rewards is business model innovation. Because your business model needs to be changed in order to incorporate those aspects. So meaning that you have a relevant cost structure, meaning that you have relevant partners, relevant value proposition, and new revenue streams coming in. And that is also something that is happening right now in the mining industry, and that's why the mining industry is a very exciting place to be right now.
So hopefully throughout this presentation that we've given, we actually have raised some eyes, and I hope that you now understand that innovation is not optional for your company. If you want to stay relevant for a long period of time, you need to innovate yourself.
Absolutely, I totally agree, Martin. And obviously, if you want to talk more about this with us, if you have some challenge about innovation, something you're curious about, something that we might help you to guide you in the right direction with, obviously feel free to contact us. We would love to be in touch with you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Hej, Daniel Bergs heter jag. Jag jobbar på Scanias avdelning för autonoma fordon. I den här presentationen tänkte jag ge er vår syn på vad autonoma fordon kommer innebära för gruvindustrin. Scania har länge varit närvarande i gruvindustrin såväl i svenska Malmfälten som i många utländska gruvor. Det har dock skötts ganska decentraliserat av varje land för sig. I början av 2000-talet hände några saker som gjorde att den satsningen blev lite mer centraliserad. Och det började med att i Brasilien så köpte Vale en mindre operatör som körde Scania. Och det här var något nytt för Vale, men det väckte ett intresse och det innebär att Scania efter det är en leverantör till Vale och Vale är i sig vår största kund. I Indonesien fick United Tractors distributörskapet för Scania. United Tractors är agent för bland annat Komatsu och hade alltså stor erfarenhet inom mining. Och det öppnade en jättemarknad för oss och än idag är Indonesien en av våra viktigaste miningmarknader. 2007 gick vi in i Indien och den första modell och applikation vi drog igång var mining. Och numera är Indien en jättemarknad för oss. Och allt det här innebar att vi 2012 skapade Scania Mining, en global organisation med säte i Södertälje. Och sen har vi lokala organisationer och divisioner i våra viktigaste marknader. Och vi levererar såväl till stora gruvföretag som Rio Tinto, Vale, BHP, Alrosa, men även till mindre gruvor och åkar- eller lastbilscentraler. Vår produktrange i gruvindustrin täcker såväl dagbrott som underjordsgruvor och applikationer som tippers, dragbilar med trailers, sprängbilar, vattentankar, servicefordon, bussar och personaltransporter med mera. Och naturligt nog är den absoluta majoriteten av vår försäljning till dagbrott. Scania har rätt länge forskat kring autonoma fordon och försökt förstå dess roll i framtiden. I det arbetet har vi tittat på introduktionen av autonoma fordon kommer variera över tid. Och viktiga parametrar här är då hur det legala ramverket ser ut. Exempelvis är det redan idag tillåtet att köra autonomt på inhägnade områden men långt ifrån lika tillåtande på öppen väg. En annan parameter är att var är införande av autonomi ett behov? För att vara lite svengelsk så skilj på nice och need. Där det finns behov finns det betalningsvilja och där det finns betalningsvilja där finns det förutsättningar för verklig och snabb förändring. En tredje parameter är komplexiteten i den omkringliggande miljön. I den tidiga delen av införandet av autonoma fordon är tekniken begränsad. Det är en väldig skillnad på att köra på ett inhägnat område med väl definierad trafikmiljö där alla människor är utbildade och insatta i vad som pågår att jämföras mot att köra i en öppen stad där i stort sett inget är kontrollerat. Det blir helt enkelt en säkerhetsfråga. Allt det här tillsammans ledde oss för några år sedan att starta det första utvecklingsprojektet för autonomi tillsammans med Rio Tinto i Australien. Målet är en autonom tippbil för gruvkörning som sömlöst ska passa in i Rios verksamhet. Rio Tinto har en lång erfarenhet av autonomi och har idag autonoma tåg, borrar och gula dumprar. Och den här erfarenheten säkerställer att vi linjerar vår utveckling rätt. Det är av största vikt för Scania att säkerställa att de lösningar vi utvecklar passar våra kunder exakt som de vill ha dem. Och därför är det här samarbetet av största betydelse för oss. Drivkrafterna för att införa autonoma fordon i mining är inte annorlunda än för alla andra förändringar. Poängen är att öka intäkter, sänka kostnader eller öka säkerheten. Och exakt vilken av de här som är viktigast, det beror från fall till fall. Till exempel, genom att köra autonomt finns möjligheten att köra 24 timmar om dygnet genom att då inte behöva produktionsstopp på grund av luncher, raster, skiftbyte etc. Eller en autonom körning kräver inga chaufförer och förvisso är förarlönen signifikant. Men inte bara det, till exempel i västra Australien måste all personal flygas in till site, ibland i specialchartrade plan. De ska bo någonstans, de ska gå på gym, de ska äta och all den här kostnaden och komplexiteten kan avsevärt minska med autonoma fordon. I en underjordsgruva innebär autonoma fordon färre människor under jord, vilket naturligt innebär en ökad säkerhet. Men autonoma fordon ger fler möjligheter än att bara plocka bort föraren. Traditionellt har det alltid varit hinder för att använda små fordon i stora gruvor och det är det stora antalet fordon och förare som behövs. Det är ofta avfärdas som för komplext att hålla ordning på. Men med autonoma fordon behövs inte alla dessa förare och samordningen av fordonen sköts med exakt kontroll digitalt. Så med detta hinder borta har vi nu sett att de stora framåtlutande gruvbolagen tar ett steg tillbaka och analyserar vilka möjligheter som kommer med den här nya tekniken. Exempelvis med mindre fordon blir vägarna smalare och i en djup gruva kan väggarna bli brantare och det är enorma kostnadsreduceringar när man spränger sig ner. Det är ju inte bara dumper som blir autonoma utan alla fordon kan bli det. Redan idag är produktionsborrarna autonoma och genom att göra spräng- och anfobilar autonoma ger det möjlighet att hela drill and fill fri från människor med avsevärt ökad säkerhet. För i en underjordsgruva kan det bli rejäla vinster med autonoma och fjärrstyrda fordon. Efter varje sprängning blir det ett långt stillestånd till dammet lagt sig och luften är säker för människor att andas och säkerheten är bekräftad. Autonoma fordon skulle kunna möjliggöra ett kortare stillestånd. Så fort fordonets lidare kan se kan den börja köra oavsett om luften fortfarande är otjänlig för människor och trots att berget inte är helt säkrat. Riktigt intressant blir det när man kombinerar de här nya teknikerna. Exempelvis om man har elektriska och autonoma fordon under jord, då får man en tydlig vinst i och med att elektriska fordon inte behöver alls så mycket ventilation som förbränningsmotordrivna fordon. Dessutom då de är autonoma behövs inte luften heller syresättas för att människor ska kunna använda den. Men ingen gruva är ju helt fri från människor och det är här Internet of Things och saker som Smart Ventilation kommer in. Genom att sektionera gruvan i olika zoner och koppla syremätare till Ventilation on Demand-system skulle man kunna uppnå den här kostnadssäkringen samtidigt som man säkerställer en säker miljö för de människor som ändå finns där nere. Var och en av de här teknikerna ger en vinst, men att kombinera dem, det är det som ger den stora vinsten. Och det är genom att förstå de här sammanhangen som vi styr vår utveckling så att vi har produkter som passar för den framtida gruvan, vägen och staden. Det här var en kort beskrivning av hur Scania ser på införandet av autonomi i gruvor. Och har ni några frågor så har ni min mailadress på skärmen och det är bara att höra av er. Tack för mig.
Hi, my name is Morten Fröjde. I'm a co-founder of FS Links and working as project manager for the Nordic Low Latency Network, NCDP. Thank you for inviting me to this conference to talk about innovation. Today I'm going to focus on two cases that include virtual and physical mobility and different technologies. The first one is vehicles levitating in air-evacuated environments, also known as Hyperloop, and the digital one is our low-latency Nordic network. But first, some personal reflections on how to predict areas of innovation. I'm looking for drivers, both the pull forces and push forces. Sometimes it is technology that's been developed, and sometimes there is a need from the public or from your clients that drive the innovation. Take sustainability, for instance. If we look at that symbol, it represents reduce, reuse, and recycle. And we are pretty good at recycling, but we tend to forget the first priorities. And maybe this is an area where we can look for new innovations. Legislation could be one push force, but today we have another one, which is the pandemic, and we have to somehow relate to it and change our behavior. Most innovations are based on seemingly slow incremental change, but if there is an exponential growth factor hiding behind it, this could be an interesting area to look at. For instance, wavelength division multiplexing has increased the capacity of our optical fiber net by 10,000 fold, and this makes it possible today now for us to create a low latency network. Considering the theme of this conference, I thought it was appropriate to rediscover Sven Lindqvist's Dig Where You Stand movement. And this also includes looking at old research and knowledge, like the Halbach array, which is a way to organize magnets, permanent magnets, so they focus the force in one direction. And this has been very helpful in the first case that I'm going to talk about. The creative minds that I had the fortune to work with on these projects, they seem to have a mindset of their own, and they don't see failure as something bad, rather just a result and a step on the way. And they also get very excited when someone tells them that's impossible. So let's go on to the cases. Both projects started in 2015, and they are solving the same problem, how to deal with the geographical distances that we have here on Holland Island to our neighboring regions. Two of my colleagues and I, we started looking into the possibility of creating a fixed link between Finland and Sweden. While digging through old plans, we realized that this was an old idea from the 60s, and we decided to dust it off and started a company called FS Links. And together with business owners and Chamber of Commerce, we arranged a seminar at the Finnish Embassy in Stockholm. What Josh Geigel told us the night before at dinner and at the seminar made us realize that the technological breakthrough might be around the corner, and this would mean for a fixed link between Finland and Sweden that our estimated 3-4 hours in a train could be reduced to about half an hour. Since Hyperloop One offered to invest in our 1-month-old startup, we realized that we overnight became a Hyperloop One partner together with big companies like Deutsche Bahn and SNCF. It also gave us funding to start building a business case on a Hyperloop route in the Nordics. 6 months later, we were invited to a propulsion test at the test site in the Nevada desert. So this is a sled on a traditional rail, powered by a linear motor in the center, and the brakes are just a sand trap.
3, 2, 1, start.
A blur across the desert, 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. The first step in a plan to shuttle up to 100,000 people a day, hundreds of miles at the speed of sound.
Nothing extraordinary there, except maybe that the linear motor was already at version 7 and I guess technological readiness level 8, almost 9, ready to be mass produced. The rest of the components are a control system, which governs acceleration, braking, could be autonomously controlled. The tube, vacuum, needs compressors, levitation, magnets arranged in a Halbach array, propulsion, the linear engine. But still, to make this into a functional transportation system, you need a lot of engineering and also some kind of standard and regulatory framework, so it's safe and people accept to travel in this environment, which is very close to what you experience in an airplane. Since the propulsion test in Nevada, several actors have appeared on the market and some of them has disappeared. Hyperloop might not be in the media as much as in the beginning, but there are companies developing Hyperloop systems right now. And let's finally take a look at where we are today. So here we have the present version of a pod, and Josh Geigel, the CTO, and Sarah Lucian is about to be the first people who are traveling in a Hyperloop system. In the meantime, the European Union has set up a Hyperloop standardization committee, and similar process is ongoing in Sweden, where the Swedish Institute of Standardization is putting together a team to mirror the European Committee. Watching Josh travel in his own design 5 years after he presented his future vision at the Finnish Embassy is pretty rewarding. And it's also funny that the tube they're traveling in is a Mexican sewage pipe, the cheapest pipe you can find on the market. So you don't have to use high tech to create something disruptive, which kind of proves the point, dig where you stand. Over to the second case, which solves a similar problem, but in a different fashion. Remote North, Nordic Center for Digital Presence, is a result of a series of projects on low latency. It is a network that meets every second week and discusses ongoing projects and shares information. Latency is a problem you experience when you try to play music on existing platforms as Teams or Zoom, or video conference. The solution is not to compress video or audio signals. Instead, you send native signals through a media router that translates them into optical fiber signals, and in the other end there's another media router that converts them back again. This process takes about 2 milliseconds. So the rest of the latency is actually the physical distance, because the speed of light is still fixed. By using wavelength division multiplexing together with this media router, we create a secure tunnel for the signals, and we're not competing with the day-to-day broadband business or the business model at all. This also means that the system is content agnostic, so you could put whatever type of signals in it, for instance monitoring or remote control signals from many channels. So what makes this possible is the incremental but exponential development of the capacity in the existing fiber nets in Sweden and Finland and in the Nordics in general. Music education demands very low latency, especially if you are educating young people. And it might look a bit messy when you are testing and failing and testing again, but you learn a lot, and now we have a fairly good grip on what the teachers want and how the tools should function. We feel the bulk of the development and testing is done, and now we're focusing on expanding the low latency network together with our partners. And perhaps that could include the mining industry, who knows? Currently we are working in central Sweden to provide culture schools with this low latency tool. Thank you for your attention, and I'll end this video with some thoughts from our network partners and from our latest demo. Thank you.
I kommande demonstrationer kommer du att få ta del av ett nytt format som Riksteatern tillsammans med många samarbetspartners i nätverket Remote North och NCDP har tagit fram. Vi kallar det Kulturnät Sverige.
Alla rapporterar att de glömmer efter ett tag att de inte är i samma rum. Känslan av närvaro är påtagligt. Det går att spela med, spela emot, ta initiativ och följa den andra. Precis som om man stod in till varandra. Det går att till och med uppnå det vi ofta benämner flow. Det medvetenhet av tid och rum blir underordnad ett djupare musicerande. Här eller där blir det med här i bägge fallen.
Har du sålt till Bibi? Är det du har gjort?
Bibi har alltid älskat den här gården.
Har du sålt till min före detta fru? Jag ska sova i iglon i natt i alla fall. Du får sova i tältet.
Men det var ju min tur i iglon.
Jag klarar inte av den här temperatursvängningen. Matrix! Älskling! Hjälp mig!
Kom! Hoppa!
Jag kan inte!
Jo men kom! Du klarar det, älskling, snälla! Försvinn inte in i Matrix nu igen!
Men det är som en undersökning i det okända som känns väldigt spännande.
Mm. Absolut. Det är ju otroligt mycket som går att utveckla med det här. Vi har ju motion capture, vi kan sända scenografi och sådana här saker som har prövats. Och det finns mycket mer inom musik och även visuell konst. Och just genom att vi kan göra det direkt med den digitala tekniken utan fördröjningar, så är vi ett helt nytt paradigmskifte, skulle man kunna säga.
Ja, jag känner mig som Alice i Underlandet när man kommer hit.
Nästa bild.
Ja! Någon kommer och hämtar honom. Äntligen.
So thank you all for some very interesting films. And some of you have extensive experience in the mining and minerals industry, and some of you have less experience, but you are all very much active in the field of innovation. And I think we can all agree that innovation is critical for all industries. You know, the saying innovate or die is not just a cliche, and our industry cannot be viewed as a mature and strategically focused innovator, not yet anyway. So the first question for all of you is, of course, why is the mining industry not as innovative compared to, for example, the manufacturing industry? Why would you say that is, and how can we actually change that? Daniel, would you like to start?
Yes, okay, maybe it's because, I mean, if you look at the EBIT of the largest companies of the world, there are mining companies of the world, they're like 40 to 50%. So you could ask yourself, do they have to be?
Yeah.
That's one question. And the other also is, well, if the business model on the mining industry is more or less, you need to produce to fulfill a long-term contract. Your goal for the operation is to produce iron ore to be put on a boat or on a ship. So any innovation, innovation you're looking at would introduce a risk into the operation. Well, whereas the operation is really risk averse. They don't want risk because they need to put iron ore on a boat. So there's a conflict there, which I think we will solve it, and I'm absolutely sure we will. But I think if you're looking for explanations why there could be viewed as a traditional industries, it doesn't really, they don't have to be innovative. We're looking from a profit point of view, and also it's very risk-averse organization. That's, if you look, of all the companies I've talked to, I could summarize my, that's how I've.
And you, as a part of Scania, you are a supplier to the mining industry. How does that affect you, this maturity?
Yes, I mean, obviously, we are not the big yellow gear like you see today. We're not Komatsu. We have small on-road trucks adapted for mining. So when we try to propose another way of doing business to these industries, we're met with sort of a don't fix it if it's not broken mentality. I mean, we're doing fine as it is. Why should we do this? And we have to convince them, but if you do it in the right scenario, we can make more money for you. But it's like, making enough money as it is. So it's hard to convince someone who has no real sense of urgency that they have to change. Obviously, that has changed, and we have the big mining companies of Australia we're working with. They're already there now. But we have seen it over the years. It's like, don't fix it if it's not broken.
Yeah.
No more risks.
Yep. Interesting. Martin, what would you say on this? The mining industry might be not as innovative as other industries.
No, but I totally agree with Daniel, what he said. And coming into, without prior knowledge to the mining industry a few years back, when I came into this line of business and started meeting with companies in the mining industry, I totally agree with what Daniel said, that it all comes down to the risk. So if they are risking to lose production, they are not willing to take that chance. And I think that we can actually see that starting to change now, because with digital tools and with the transformation towards digital way of working, I think that will mitigate that risk in the future. So hopefully we will see that making changes or implementing innovation will not be as risky as before. You can kind of predict the outcome of the innovation already before you implement it. So I think that's where we are going in a big sense. Yeah.
Okay. Morten, you have a little less experience from the mining industry compared to the others. How do you view this question?
Yeah, you're completely right. I have some experience of tunneling because we are prospecting a tunnel here on the Åland Islands right now to connect two islands. But I guess, it's interesting when you see incremental changes happening and you don't really realize them, but behind the incremental changes, there might be exponential growth, that growth function. So suddenly, some changes in material or technology leads to totally new innovations. And most of the time in those cases that I have been experiencing, mobility, physical mobility and virtual mobility, there has been a long development, and suddenly the possibilities are totally new to do something that was maybe an old idea, so you can dust it off and realize the old idea.
Okay, great, thank you. And Jan, you have experience from innovation in many different fields. How do you view the mining industry as a standalone industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. And first of all, I want to concur with what the others have been saying here. I mean, I kind of look at it in sort of like, what is the driver of innovation in general? I mean, of course, it can be company-specific drivers. I mean, you want to improve your profitability, you want to grow, etc. There can be industry-specific drivers. I mean, looking at what your competitors are doing, and you want to keep up with that or maybe surpass them. Or what's happening right now, also, I think, in the mining industry is that there is this sort of like macro trends and macro demands that you innovate in certain areas, such as sustainability and digitalization. I mean, there's this sort of macro factor impacts the mining industry like quite a lot now, and that sort of drives them towards innovation, perhaps more so than a company-specific reason or competitive reasons found in the competitive landscape.
Okay, and Lisa, you are the representative of the mining companies here, so to say. How would you say your point of view is on this question?
Well, I agree on that we are quite risk aware. But I also think that the mining industry is kind of striving to be innovative, but maybe with its own measurements. The operations and procedures are complex and expensive and strictly regulated in many ways. So it is maybe a bit unfair to compare it with any other industry. But with that said, I think that we can really benefit from looking at other industries and to do cross-bordering collaborations, because I mean, speaking of digitalization and automation, we have a lot of similar challenges now. So we're on a good way.
I think so too. And to keep up with that point, I mean, both you, Daniel, and Lisa, you are active and working in the field of innovations within mining automation. So how has the industry transformed in this area over the last couple of years? And what can be done to really accelerate the pace when it comes to automation in mining? Do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the big mining companies, I have most experience of open pit mining. So I think, which is good, and Lisa has probably more experience of underground mining. But if you look in the open pit mining, Rio Tinto, they've used autonomous vehicles, autonomous dump trucks for a number of years now. But they haven't really made it like any major change. They basically just took away the driver. Whereas we see now, when they see the opportunity for other type of players like Scania or Volvo to come in this, what would that mean for the way we do mining? So actually, the big mining companies have all said that they are actually looking at now. So what would this new way of working mean for them? Not saying that it will change, but at least they're actually looking at doing things differently. I see that's quite a bit different for last year's, for if you compare to like 2010-11 when we started these talks.
So it's been quite some years, but now maybe the pace is accelerating.
Yeah, I hope so.
I hope so, yeah. Lisa, what would you say? How has the industry's view changed when it comes to automation?
Well, if we talk about automation in a bigger scale, and also to comment, yes, I have my experiences mainly from the underground mines. And I would say that maybe that if we look back, that the installation of Wi-Fi and positioning services has been like the main enabler and the important milestone. And from that point, from when we started to have that in our minds, I think the development is kind of accelerating, because now we see in many different fields that like remote control and small semi-automation initiatives is taking place. And so yeah, but we just need to find like the courage and the ways to work agile and team up with others and start to test these things
in some scale to start with, and to test it out in sharp environments and then let it grow. I think that's the key to accelerate innovation.
Yep, I think you are very much correct. But in keeping within this thread of automation, remote controlling, and also drones and so on, all areas that will really affect the human role within mining. So what is, in all of your minds, the attribute and the competences of a person working in the mining industry in, let's say, 10 to 15 years? What will this person do? Janne, do you want to start elaborating?
Sure. I mean, I can give it a go, and then the others will fill in here. But what you're looking at here, I mean, it's a totally different profile of any employee working in mining operations. I mean, if you go 15 years into the future and then compare with how it was 15 years ago, so you get like a 30-year span there. I mean, then I think there is a huge difference. I mean, if you go back 15, 20 years ago, maybe you could recruit people who barely finished high school, whereas now they need to have a fundamental strong knowledge in how technology works, how to operate technology, and be comfortable using it. So I think that's sort of like the baseline has moved upwards. So the threshold, in a way, to even work in mining operations, I mean, that the threshold has become higher. And that also demands different things for the mining companies when they recruit and what they need to look at and how they need to develop future employees. I mean, that could start with the high school level education even before that, in a sense. I mean, it's a new challenge facing them, absolutely.
Okay, Martin, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's hard to predict, but I would say it's not unlikely that the profile will be different in the future, and that to some extent, I think the employee will be more tech savvy. They will be more comfortable operating digital tools, whether it's remote driving of vehicles or if it's predicting the outcome of the production. I think digital skills is something that will be important for the future of mining. And I think, yeah, well, I would say that would be my main input in this.
Thank you. Morten, how do you view this as sort of an outside perspective, but still very much in the innovative sector? How do you think the human role in mining will change?
Well, since you're talking about automation and autonomous vehicles, and I presume that they will still be monitored and maybe you have a manual override, I would guess that you might find some future staff among, let's say, game developers or someone who is good at remote controlling and is used to a digital interface.
Yep. Yeah, you're probably very much correct. And Lisa, this is sort of one of your issues close to your heart if you read your bio. So what is your view on this question?
Yes, well, first of all, I don't have any answers. And also, I mean, 15 years ahead, it's a quite long time. A lot can happen, especially if we now think that the pace will accelerate. But still, I think that, I can tell you about a mine worker I once met quite early when I started at Boliden, who was a bit, I think he was a little bit annoyed at the moment for some reason, but he talked about like the old school miners being mine workers. They knew the rock and the circumstances and everything. And nowadays it was only Nintendo drillers, as he called them. They were mainly machine operators instead of mine workers. And I think that we will continue on that development, as you said previously now, we will like interact with systems in a larger extent, of course. But then also, of course, it will be important to keep up the automation that we have, to keep it up and running. Like keeping the network and the system infrastructure working and the machines at their intended function.
So both like mechanical and system knowledge and IT knowledge will of course be important, but maybe that will be applied in another way that we apply that kind of knowledge today, I guess. Yeah, and one quite new thought that we have like previously discussed in different workshops is that maybe your current actual position will be more important for your tasks than your organizational belonging, and also that the new systems will enable collaboration in a whole other way within the mine.
Okay, so less rocks, more systems, more collaboration. Daniel, what do you say?
Yeah, I agree with everyone before me, and I also think there will still need to be a lot of maintenance people on site. I think there will be a number of people just monitoring that everything works as it is, but they don't have to be on site. So they could be located near town when you had a lot of mines outside, so they can still monitor everything, but then you need maintenance crew that could take care of the machines or making sure that the network is up and running and all of these things. So I think there will be maybe some of the, obviously, if it's an autonomous mine, there will be no drivers, but there could still be remote controlled operators and so on, but they don't have to be in the mine. Right. So this opens up for a lot of possibilities for those who want to work with mining. They don't have to move into the middle of nowhere or FIFO in and out, and with all the problems of having a family and all of those things. So I think it opens up for a lot of new ways of working and people that could work with mining who previously wasn't really prepared to do so.
Mm. Yeah, that could be an upside, for sure. Okay, so Martin and Jan, you have worked in innovation projects in many different areas when it comes to mining. What sort of emerging technologies has the potential to have the most transformative impact on the mining industry? In your mind, what are the coolest innovation areas coming up? Jan, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is going to be a kind of a broad answer, but I mean, a lot of it comes down to AI, artificial intelligence, if you ask me, because first of all, that is something that is being looked at right now. It's being applied, it's being considered for all kinds of different parts of the mining operation, whether it's drill core scanning, whether it's about predictive maintenance, whether it's about data analytics, etc., etc. I mean, it can be applied in so many different ways, and that is a cost cutter everywhere you go with it. Everywhere you go with it, if you put in AI, it has a potential to cut the cost significantly for the mining company, and that's kind of always something that they want, right? I mean, they want the operating expenditure to go down because that's how they become more profitable. So I think that's a huge drive for everything in a broad sense. I would say artificial intelligence, and maybe Martin, you can maybe give some concrete examples, or if you want to go in a different direction.
No, well, I agree with you, Jan, and I think we come back to the digitalization. I think in our movie we talked about the major trends that we could see within mining, which is sustainability and digitalization. And I think this goes hand in hand. And what we talked about earlier is that one of the barriers that we have identified for innovation within mining has been the risk. It's too large of a risk to start innovating. And again, coming back to digitalization, I think that simulation, what I often hear referred to as digital twins, that is something that has great potential to actually mitigate those risks. So if we are able to make decisions based on data that has been processed and being able to confidently be able to predict the outcome, it will mitigate the risk to actually make changes. So I think digital twin simulation in all its forms, that's important tools to be using in the future.
Yeah, and it sort of ties up to what Lisa said earlier as well. So first, digital twins simulate and then test in a really small scale in an operational environment, and then move on. So I like that kind of idea. Morten, what would you say is the innovation area with the most impact potential for the mining industry?
I don't know if it's an innovation area, but I know when I talk to people at SpaceX and at Virgin Hyperloop that they said the development of processing power is making it able, they are able to go from prototype to industrial production. And I guess something similar could happen within the mining industry. As was mentioned earlier, simulation could be done in a much more high resolution version. And of course, education, remote education also, you could get know-how from all over the country or the Nordics to collaborate with.
Great, thank you. So Daniel, what do you say? What is the coolest innovation area?
I mean, I think we've been asked about automation for a number of years, but recently I would say more and more related to sustainability. Electric vehicles, how would an electric truck from us look like, and what would be charging infrastructure and all of these things. I would say autonomy is probably more mature now. Even if we're not there, but at least a mature question. And now we're into much more relating to sustainability to fulfill the mining companies' CO2 targets. So I think much more questions relating to that one.
Glad to hear.
Yeah. Very.
So Lisa, last off in this question, what would you say is the areas with the most impact potential in this industry?
Yeah, I would also like to say going for the fossil-free mining is of course, that is something that will have a great impact on the industry. But also, actually, I would like to agree on AI, or what to call it. It could be so much and everything and nothing, machine learning and stuff like that. I think that solutions in that field of how we handle and process and manage our data, that is something that will affect both how we actually run and control the production and the processes, and also, as we talked about earlier, the development of the human role in the mine, on how we collaborate and the information that is available for us to execute our tasks and everything. So I think that what we do with our data will really be a key factor.
Yeah, I agree in full. So I want to talk to you all a little bit about business models. Love that part of the business. And mining companies are really starting to realize that their business model need to entail more than just dig up minerals and in the end put them on a boat and ship them off, perhaps. So what future business model activities are on the horizon for the mining industry, do you see? Martin, would you like to start with reasoning?
Yes, and I think we touched upon this in our video a little bit. With sustainability comes a huge amount of possibilities to look into. You are now looking at what you considered to be maybe a waste problem before. You can actually see potential in that to reprocess material that has been lying around for a long time. And that, I would say, that's a big change to your business model. Looking at the new potential in old material, I think that's great in terms of sustainability, but also in terms of the business models for the mining companies.
Okay, great. Morten, what would you say regarding business model and the future?
Well, I have to agree that sustainability will be a big issue. And if you look at the logo, the 3 arrows, it starts with reducing, and then it's reusing, and it's as a third action, it's recycling. And we're pretty good at recycling, but more and more there are more demands from the public and from authorities that we should also look into reducing and reusing. So I think this area there's a lot of potential here, and I guess the clients or customers of the mining companies also feel this push force from legislation and from the public.
Yeah, let's hope they do. I mean, it's probably starting to anyway. So, Lisa, how do you see this? Do Boliden, do you have a lot of talks on new business models and where you will position yourself in the near future?
I can share one thought that has really not been like up for discussion, but I think it's an interesting, like, thought triggering idea, and that is something that it was someone during a workshop for many years ago who mentioned this thing. She didn't work at Boliden, but maybe Boliden should start renting out metals. And I think that's an interesting thought, since, I mean, we do all the steps from exploration to recycling today, and we could be even greater at recycling also, since it's an important part. And just as a triggering idea, and we have been, I mean, have had ideas about like to sell or rent out completely environmental friendly metals as a labeled product or something. I don't have a really good answer, but I think going towards those kind of ideas is at least inspiring.
Yeah, it is indeed. And later on this day, we will have a discussion on traceability and certifications of metals and minerals. And that are sort of the key to be able to promise such a thing as well. So, Daniel, what do you say? What are the future business model activities needed?
I agree with the ones before now, especially on the traceability. I think mining companies will need to be part of the solution rather than the problem. I mean, obviously, mining in a lot of areas is not considered to be the problem with waste and with everything else. So I think they're now in this phase where they want to change and maybe then promised X amount of kilograms of CO2 per ton produced iron ore or whatever that might be, in order to support their customers in their manufacturing, or support the traceability and map what is the environmental impact of all the product we're using, and they need to be a part of that solution. And I think they understand that. And I think where they're actually going as well. So I think sustainability is the biggest change which I've seen as far until now, at least.
All right. And Jan, you have worked a lot in the last couple of years in innovative business models. How do you view the mining industry when it comes to this issue?
Well, I mean, just to summarize a little bit, I mean, it sort of goes back to everything we've already been discussing here in terms of the mining industry being rather conservative, rather risk averse. But then again, I mean, you're starting to see companies who want to sort of experiment and branch out and so forth. I mean, I think LKAB is a very interesting example in terms of what they're doing, not just in terms of trying to create value out of the tailing dam waste and create a business model around that, but also the fact that they're actually kind of taking on different type of value chain activities, or will do that in the future at least, because now they're moving more in terms of closer at least to steel production and sort of that step in the value chain, and more in terms of refining the actual iron ore that comes out of the ground, and not just sort of like ship it off on a train to Narvik or to Luleå. And I think that is quite interesting. It's an interesting step for them, and it's also a step that makes sense, because I mean, the way the mining companies have been operating, I mean, they've been operating that way for 150 years or more or less in terms of the business model. But I mean, if they would actually start off from scratch, they wouldn't exactly do it in the same way. So I think that is quite interesting. And another trend that I see coming up a lot is the more sort of like open innovation efforts that mining companies are undertaking in terms of collaborating with startups, with tech companies, to create something new. And I mean, that could be a product or a solution, and when they co-create it, maybe they co-own it, maybe they invest equity in a startup and so forth, and then through that, then they're commercializing something together and put it to the market together, which could, for instance, be used by other mining companies or by other industries. So they're also branching out in that direction as well, sort of like you know, what you may refer to as an unrelated diversification or something. So, I mean, there are definitely things going on here, and I think it's just been accelerating for the last few years.
Okay, so we just have one final question for all of you, and that's a tremendously broad question, but would you say that innovation drives societal development, or would you say it's the other way around? And Morten, would you like to start reasoning here?
Yeah, it's in our case, when it comes to low latency telepresence, of course, there's a need from music education and performing arts, especially during this pandemic. So we have these push and pull forces that we have to identify. And in our case, we realized that the fiber network, the capacity in one fiber has increased by 10,000 times, and the Swedish population has not grown 10,000 times in 20 years. So suddenly there is a lot of free capacity, and that makes it possible for us to do low latency communication into two directions. So in that case, we developed this format, and now there are now this is kind of changing the behavior of future users. But nowadays, innovation is in many cases societal by themselves. So it's both ways around, I think. And I mentioned earlier where you can look if you want to see where new innovations will come. I think what I used to do is to look at long-term incremental development in some field and then see if there is this exponential growth behind it. And in this case, at the Mineral and Mining Conference, I would take the Swedish concept of dig where you stand, because you have a lot of knowledge. You might, and you have gathered it over a long period of time, and you might actually be able to use it in a little bit different fields and solve problems with the existing knowledge that you have.
Okay, interesting. Interesting indeed. So Martin, what would you say? What drives what?
I mean, it's a little bit what came first, but I would say they go hand in hand. So the developments in the society might be considered an enabling factor for innovation. I think the society needs to be ready or needs to start putting demand on the industries for them to react to this. And I think, I mean, in big, I would say sustainability, for example, that would be a change from the society forcing or enabling innovation within the industries. But then what innovation comes out of that, I think it's for the industry to kind of figure out what is needed. But if, for example, 10 years ago, a mining company would suggest that let's try to do fossil fuel free iron, the stockholders would probably not be that happy about it. But nowadays, the society not only wants that, but they almost demands it. So now I think the society has set the playing grounds for what innovation is needed within the mining industry.
Okay, so I think that was our cue to keep in time point, and a million thanks to all 5 of you. You are all active in a very exciting field. So let's hope for continued acceleration within the field of innovation in the mining industry, and hopefully we'll see each other in 2 years and have some good news to share then as well. So thank you for being a part of this, and have a nice day. So that was our innovation session of the Future Mine and Mineral Conference 2021. Thank you all for watching that. Now it's time for a coffee break. So go outside, stretch your legs, and see you back in a little while.